Thank you everybody for coming to our second indexing transformation seminar of the year. It's an absolute pleasure for me to welcome a colleague of mine, Dr. Shaheed Tayob, who will present today on race, animals and religion, a case of sacrifice, sensory politics and public space in South Africa. Now Shaheed, as many of you know, completed a PhD at the Max Planck Institute in 2017. He joined us shortly thereafter, and so he's been with us for about 2.5 years. Most of his work is based in India, where his dissertation fieldwork was especially on Muslim food practices, but he's also started writing on South Africa, and he's been a wonderful colleague, and it's really our pleasure to have him. So Shaheed will talk as per normal for 40 to 45 minutes, and then we'll have 45 minutes of questions. So thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, thank you so much for coming. And Bernard, this opportunity to present this paper. The paper came out, it comes out of my interest in India, but obviously being in South Africa and the incidents I will speak about. They caught my attention and I was starting to kind of write about them. I think there are things we're all familiar with. I'm going to show you the picture. Everybody knows the Clifton incident, and you should have probably heard about Scargate. Right? So I'm talking about this, but there's also another story. Okay, so the title of my paper is Race, Animals and Religion, a case of sacrifice, sensory politics, and public space in South Africa. On Saturday, the 14th of October, 2017, a Muslim family arranged for their son's 7th birthday party to be held in a public park in a fast gentrifying neighborhood close to the center of Cape Town, or Woodstock. The neighborhood had many years ago been a racially mixed area, comprising Malay Muslims, colored Christians, Jewish and Portuguese. During apartheid, the area was rezoned as a colored residential area. Woodstock is very close to the now mostly vacant garment factories in Salt River that were once a major locus of economic activity. During the 1990s, low-tariff Chinese imports dealt a blow to the economy of the area. However, Woodstock is a mere 5-minute drive from the Cape Town CBD and a little bit further onto the famous Atlantic seaboard. During the 2000s, the neighborhood became a target of gentrification, as young couples and investors, many of whom were from white upper and middle class backgrounds, found an opportunity redeveloping the sometimes decrepit and poorly maintained Victorian-style houses that are famous in the area. On this Saturday afternoon, on the 14th of October, the family had obtained permission from the municipal authorities for a permit to set up a petting zoo for their son, his friends, and family. The young boy is passionate about animals and has aspirations of becoming a veterinarian. On the day of the party, a group of friends and family were celebrating in the park, accompanied by chickens, roosters, birds, rabbits, and a dwarf goat. During the party, a local white resident of the area, whom I have named Mary Wallace, who was someone who had moved to Woodstock in 2004, was out walking her dog. Approaching the park, she noticed, to quote, that the children's section of the park was really full of people, and her dog was becoming agitated. So to continue her quote. So we were unsure about whether or not to go, right? Whether to go or not. We hadn't had a good look at what was going on. The park was extremely full, and there was a goat tied to one of the poles of the swings with a very short rope, and the goat was screaming. I saw the goat. I said to my husband, there's a goat tied to the pole with a very short rope. And my husband said, let's get the dog out of here. They're going to completely freak out. Describing herself as a concerned animal rights activist, she made the decision to share a post on the neighborhood Facebook group. She explained that her decision to share the post on the group was due to her feeling that it was a safe space where she may find advice and support. She rushed online and posted the following: help, there's a goat tied to a pole in the children's park in Queen's Park. Huge crowd of people. Goat is screaming. What to do? Help. She described herself as hysterical and overcome with horror at what she perceived as the ill treatment of the screaming goat. She contacted the local branch of the SPCA with the report that there was a goat in the park restrained by a very short rope. and was advised by fellow residents to alert the police. The police inquired as to whether the goat had in fact committed a crime. So as the furor unfolded, it was clear that her concern for the well-being of the now anthropomorphized goat had evolved into a racially charged discussion about the possible horrors in the park. Concerned residents, all white, rushed in with advice of support and concern that clearly drawn tropes of racialized barbaric otherness. Mary exclaimed that she ran away from the scene. In a comment of support, another woman explained that she had ventured nearby, noticed the huge group, and also left. However, she was there long enough to note the strong smell of bride. Others chimed in with suspicions of bestiality and assertions that slaughter could be the only possible explanation. To quote another respondent, what would they want with a goat unless they were having sex with the goat? End quote. Mary did step in to calm the chorus of suspicion and accusation with a more rational approach by doubting whether, to quote, it would be possible to slaughter, skin, and prepare an animal in that space of time, end quote. So she had this kind of rational response, that is it really possible? You know? However, during this early exchange, there was no awareness that the tropes through which the accusations, suspicion, and horror were articulated were drawn from a long history of racial and colonial typecasting and denigration. As the discussion, concern, and fear circulated, it was brought to the attention of a prominent social media influencer, Aisha Baker, a Muslim person, who was at the very same birthday party. She was very famous. She tweeted about the incident, drawing attention to the automatic association between crowds, animals, and fear that had transpired. From then, the issue went viral and appeared in several newspapers. The response in the public were a mixture of horror and exasperation, with another instance of racial profiling in the South African public. The father of the boy later turned to social media with a humorous response about having seen, to quote, suspicious Caucasians lurking in the park, and offered advice to Mary that, quote, it would have been prudent to approach us and inquire, end quote. He specifically cast a critical eye on those who considered themselves what he called saviors of humanity, by which he meant, again to use his phrase, previously and currently advantaged Cape Town elitists, end quote. In his response, it was clear that he articulated the incident as indicative of the nation's need to overcome racial divisions and the necessity of white liberals to move beyond what he considered to be a savior mentality. The event signaled the increasing fragility of the South African public sphere, where race has recently resurfaced as a topic of public debate, controversy, and political currency. What emerges from the concerns of a committed animal activist and vegan is a racially charged debate on questions of transformation, paternalism, and access to and control of public space. The Facebook group discussion clearly revealed the normative assumptions about animals, race, and space in the embodied responses of these white, liberal, middle-class participants on the Facebook group. The bifurcated response between the suspicious online commentators and the participants at the party further calls to light the split nature of South African publics. Here, not around questions of language necessarily, as they were all engaging in English public sphere, but about how exactly public space is supposed to be used and who is about access to it and what is allowed in the park. Okay. So that's the first incident. This was called Goat Gate. It happened in Woodstock Park, when did I say? 2017, 14th of October. The next section is called Scarpgate, Sacrifice, Ancestors, and Exercising Racism. On the 23rd of December 2018, at 8 p.m. in the evening, a private security company, Professional Protection Alternatives, PPA, undertook to shut down a popular public beach on the Atlantic seaboard, Clifton. Present during the security operation was the Western Cape Provincial Secretary of the ANC and a prominent lawyer and director of the Women's Legal Resource Center. The group were out celebrating an annual family picnic. Just before 8 p.m., they were approached and asked to leave the beach. The two recognized their friends. They recognized that the enforcers were a private security company and took to Twitter to publicize the incursion of private interest into public space. The closure of the beach was viewed once again online by commentators, many of them, as a return to apartheid practices where the presence of non-white people in public space was regulated according to police-imposed curfews. In response to the public outrage, both the City of Cape Town and the PPA were asked to explain the incident. Initially, the PPA, the security company, claimed that they had not closed the beach, but had been assisting the city's law enforcement officers in a security operation after 2 teenagers had been allegedly raped. Describing the chaos on the beach and the need for control, the statement both claimed to have closed the beach in assistance of the police and not closed the beach. Contrary to the PPA statement, the South African Police Service released a statement, quote, "No rape was registered at Camps Bay SAPS," but they did report that a report of sexual assault had been investigated the previous day, like the day before that. Finally, 5 days after the event, so the City of Cape Town was silent as this went on. 5 days after the event, on the 28th of December, Dan Plato released an official statement to clarify the city's relationship to the PPA, as well as to attack what had since then developed into a racialized and politicized uproar in national newspapers and social media. According to Plato, the PPA was in fact not operating under the auspices of the city and had no authority to conduct security operations on a public beach. However, he also added that the incident could not possibly be considered racist since, quote, "they asked people of all races to leave and did not single out any race groups," end quote. 2 months later, the PPA and the city both presented their case to a portfolio committee on environmental affairs in Parliament, along with eyewitnesses, where they both submitted, once again, that the beach was not in fact closed on the day, and that beachgoers were advised to leave rather than forced. As the event unfolded, it was clear that another public incident regarding race and access to public space had reared its head in South Africa. Competing political parties vied to establish their version of events, either as proof of the continuation of apartheid practices in South Africa, or as an unfortunate incident that was actually about public safety and order rather than race. Familiar positions, I think. The founding statement by the police and the city, and the highly politicized arguments of the opposition political parties, took place 5 minutes before the provincial elections, and was ripe fodder for the ANC and other parties as political mileage. However, the widespread public anger exceeded the interests of political parties. Indeed, the way in which false claims of rape were used to justify the imposition of public order was for many clearly indicative of racial policing. The notion of an unruly and violent black crowd, together with claims of fear, of sexual violence, and general lack of order, is a racial and colonial trope that has been powerful in authorizing the exclusion and denigration of black South Africans, but really about policing race around the world, in the modern world. Immediately, a group came together to form what they call the Black People's National Crisis Committee. Many among the group had spearheaded the Rose Must Fall campaign in 2015. An organizer of the committee, Solani, named the crisis as a crisis of racism in the country. Quote, "I know how these people are when they see a congregation of black people in a space. All their irrational attitudes and presuppositions come to the fore, and they always want to police in a manner that seems to reproduce notions of apartheid," end quote. For the committee, the incident was linked to an ongoing crisis in the country, where racism had been officially abandoned as state policy, but lingered in everyday life, spatial politics, and neoliberal security action. After much deliberation, the group decided to sacrifice a sheep on the very beach that had been at the center of the controversy. On the 28th of December 2019, the organizers arrived at Clifton Beach, much to the interest of the media as well as animal rights groups, including the SPCA. Immediately following the slaughter, a bifurcated public again emerged, with predominantly black commentators celebrating the act as the assertion of selfhood in South Africa, or just a way of disruption. However, the predominant response from mostly white middle-class South Africans was of shock and horror at a barbaric act, which they felt was detrimental to the very cause of the anti-racist process. So there were many people who came out and said, we agree with the anti-racist process, but this is not the way to do it. This is detrimental, this is horrific, this is barbaric. This time, however, Mary Wallace, the woman from Woodstock, was in support of the slaughter. She said she had made a choice between siding with, quote, black outrage and the claiming of space and the slaughtering of the sheep, and between a, to quote, white privilege, you can't do this on our beaches starts. And I think that change in her position is very important. Unlike the previous incident in Woodstock, this time an animal was in fact sacrificed. In Woodstock, it was the presence of black bodies in public space, combined with the horror, anxiety, and concern of Mary Wallace, and the racist articulations of the neighborhood Facebook group that gave rise to public outrage and debate over the insidious ways in which race and access to public space are mediated and controlled. In Clifton, however, an incident which bore ghostly traces of a colonial and apartheid past was challenged by a group of activists, scholars, and politicians. This time, the act of sacrifice was a way of claiming space and challenging the privatization and re-racialization of beaches in South Africa. Okay, so these are our opening vignettes. I want now to situate how I see we need to understand this in terms of the return to race in South Africa from rainbow nation to racial politics. After apartheid, South Africa was celebrated as a poster case for the peaceful transformation to a post-racial and multiracial society. The new state promoted the idea of South Africa as a rainbow nation. The first parliament was established as a government of national unity, designed to include cabinet representation, right, from all parties that exceeded 10% of the national voting share. The idea was to ensure a smooth and inclusive transition. Central to the politics of transition was the establishment of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, tasked with collecting testimonies of individual apartheid atrocities in exchange for amnesty for perpetrators and reparations for victims. In aiming for confessional, restorative justice, the TRC was part of the post-apartheid desire to forge a nation of multiple communities united under a single legal constitutional system. However, for Mahmoud Mandani, the TRC, quote, reduced apartheid from a relationship between the state and entire communities to one between the state and particular individuals or particular incidents. The individualization in the TRC process is evidence of the way in which a neoliberal politics of state and consumer-citizen relations had started to take hold. For critics, it became increasingly clear that the imperatives of liberation during apartheid had been compromised by the now global imperatives towards economic liberalization. Sociologists argued, particularly Jeremy Seekings and others, that the balancing act between liberation and liberalization had contributed to greater inequality in the distribution of incomes in society as a whole, as well as employment losses. So they were writing this already in 2001 and in the late 90s. A lot of sociological analysis showing how this uneasy confluence was taking place. By 2018, it had been clear that inequalities were highly racialized, with white incomes increasingly more rapidly than other races. Stephen Friedman argues that one of the reasons for the continuity, right, of this kind of old inequalities is the maintenance of what he calls cultural assumptions relating to the superiority of Western values and lifestyles, previously the exclusive domain of the white middle class, and now shared by a new black elite. Furthermore, neoliberal aspirations to become world-class produced a desire, also Friedman's arguments in another paper, produced a desire to emulate northern patterns of lifestyle and livelihood, rather than devise means to combat local urgencies of inequality, unemployment, and education. So in the end, those best posed to benefit from economic liberalization and neoliberalism, the relatively advantaged white and Indian middle class, have been the foremost benefactors of neoliberal economic policies. The widening inequality and persistence of everyday racism set the scene for the re-eruption of an ordinary politics of race. This was most forcefully articulated by the student movements and the Fees Must Fall and Rhodes Must Fall campaign, which achieved international fame through its, Rhodes Must Fall first, right? Which achieved international fame through its calls to decolonize education, transform institutions of higher education, and combat everyday insidious forms of racial exclusion. The protest began when Somali Maxwell threw feces at the statue of Cecil John Rhodes in what has been described as a visceral material act of disgust that actualized a growing mood of discontent among South Africans. The movement brought together critical race theory, South African black consciousness philosophy, and critiques of neoliberalism in its attack on both the state and the university. Feeding off critical scholarship, the activists argued that, to quote another scholar, the zeitgeist of Nelson Mandela's post-1994 government disabled radical activism by foregrounding narratives of peace and reconciliation, forgiveness and unity. The movement opted instead to foreground exclusion, poverty, broken promises, and privilege. End quote. Clearly, the politics of animals, race, sacrifice, and public space must be understood in the context of increasing inequality and the return of racial consciousness in the South African public sphere. Okay, now what I want to do is I will continue by going more into detail about the actual event around the sacrifice and how the organizers conceived of it, and then I will end by trying to theorize it or put it into some kind of perspective. Okay, the next section is titled Sacrifice as Politics, Cleansing Cape Town and Attacking the Nerve Center of Racism. For the organizers of the public sacrifice, the racist excuses and behavior of the private security, in conjunction with the area's residents and the cover-ups by the city of Cape Town, required immediate action. After much deliberation, it was decided that an animal sacrifice should be performed. The committee had experience with the power of animal sacrifice as a tool of disruption during the Rhodes Must Fall protests, when in the midst of extensive private security brutality, the group decided to slaughter a sheep on campus. To quote, "And we did it, and the animal rights people went crazy, so we already knew they were going to go crazy." End quote. Given the group's awareness of the power of public sacrifice to create consternation, concern, and hysteria amongst who they perceived as their mainly white middle-class opposition, the group decided that slaughter was the appropriate response. However, the decision to perform a public sacrifice was not only inspired by a politics of disgust and disruption, but also by a desire to assert a version of African culture and religion in particular kinds of public space. As we will see, the organizers articulate a practice of African religion that is not purist about ritual prescriptions, and that is always implicated in the politics of race and inequality in South Africa, as they see it. So, Solani and Tato were active in the organizing committee. They described sacrifice as a practice that, quote, connects us with the other world, the world of the ancestors, end quote. The spilling of blood was thus deemed a way to, again, quote, to show that we are sacrificing this beast in order to start a conversation with the ancestors, to invoke them, to make them see that we are young people. We might not know everything, but we know that they must come to our rescue, end quote. The sacrifice was thus staged as an invocation of the ancestral spirit of Makanda Nyele, a well-known anti-colonial warrior in the Xhosa community, and once prisoner on Robben Island, who is believed to have escaped imprisonment and swam to the Cape in a bid to liberate his people in the 19th century. However, he did not make the journey, and memories of his failed rescue continue to resonate in everyday speech as a trope of endless waiting, but also as an ordinary reminder of the history of loss and colonialism. So, I've been told that if you go to the shop and you take too long to come back, that your mother will tell you, you're waiting for Makanda to return. And it's just a kind of an everyday thing. So on one hand, it just means we're waiting forever, but also we have to understand it as a kind of an ordinary way in which history becomes sedimented in everyday speech. Invoking the spirit of a famous warrior's ancestor is a creative appropriation and articulation of an established ritual practice. Usually, in African religious practice, the ancestors are invoked as a link to the homestead and household, and called upon for protection from potential misfortune and strife. Here, however, the meaning of protection and power was maintained, but the specific way in which family ancestors are called upon is transformed into a family of shared oppression and strife, who require the power of the ancestors to assist in the struggle against racism and inequality. Now, the organizers are aware of the creative appropriation and redeployment of sacrifice, and anxious not to cause offense amongst other Black South Africans, they decided to avoid the symbolically charged goat, which is usually used in African traditional religious practices. They also avoided what they consider to be the pacifying influence of the African religious leaders and the Council of Traditional Healers, who, they explained, would conduct a purely cultural ceremony, replete with minute ritual concerns, yet devoid of any fire, their word, and political currency. So the point here is to say that this is about African religion and culture, but it's about change, and it's not about some primordial sense. Staging the sacrifice, the sheep was first made to drink the seawater at Clifton Beach, to imbibe the spirit of Makanda and Nyele, who had drowned in that very ocean. So that the spirit of Makanda can enter us, and we will consume it, and it will cleanse us, and it will enter us and strengthen us in order to fight the racists. So it was a two-pronged situation, where we are saying we are exercising racism and racist attitudes in the white community, right? Cleansing them, but also strengthening ourselves against the racists. To not just be victims of racism, but to be proactive in finding solutions to a problem which we never created, end quote. The sacrifice was clearly articulated as a political program that required the power of the African ancestors, now expanded to include all the anti-colonial heroes and symbols of independence that included for them Shaka Zulu and Mihanda. The goal of this political deployment of sacrifice was to disturb what Solani articulated as the nerve center of racism in South Africa. This idea of the nerve center is something I think is quite important in terms of sensory politics. The emphasis on the nerve center of racism is a symbolically charged, historically informed, material and metaphoric evocation that ties the history of colonialism in South Africa to spatial apartheid, neoliberal gentrification, and the deep politics of animal sacrifice and otherness. Again, to quote, Cape Town is in the South African imagination seems to be a colony. Cape Town spatial planning is very aggressive in demarcating spaces. So when we say it's the nerve center, in a sense we mean that colonial settlement finds its hydraulics here, how it operates. It's just in there every day. Cape Town is the microcosm of the vision of racists, of what they would want South Africa to be like. The ideas of colonial settlement and the ideas, more importantly, of colonial expansion are eminent in this place. And the apartheid intellectuals, some of them come from Stellenbosch. So Cape Town then becomes the laboratory of South African racism. End quote. Articulating Cape Town as the nerve center of racism is linked to an assessment of the history of the first colonial settlement, the aggressive spatial segregation that many argue continue in the post-apartheid context, and that the architects of apartheid stem from this very place. Explaining the latter, the architects of apartheid, Solani was clear to differentiate the subtle and sophisticated racism of Cape Town to the aggressive racism of groups like the RPF. The significance of the Atlantic seaboard was further emphasized as a space that through neoliberalism and privatization resists transformation, while remaining the poster card image of the beauty of the Cape. Finally, the metaphor of the nerve center is extended to the outrage from animal rights activists and, quote, white liberals, who were surely going to be up in arms, as he explained, which for Solani was evidence, again to quote him, that actually they don't want black people to practice their cultural practices, end quote. The sacrifice was thus a carefully calibrated and staged event that sought to call on the spirit of the ancestors of anti-colonial resistance and black African power, while simultaneously drawing attention to the continued perpetuation of racism through now neoliberalism in South Africa. The act was not merely about claiming public space, since acts of sacrifice in public space are very common in the black South African townships, but rather about specifically drawing attention to the perpetuation of racist attitudes and practices in predominantly white upper-class spaces in the city. In doing so, the protesters activated a long history of anti-colonial resistance. As early as the 1830s, the very rituals considered evidence of barbaric otherness and, to quote David Chillis, sensory disorganization. Right? So in the 19th century, the idea that Africans are dancing and making noise and just generally out of control was widespread. So the very rituals considered evidence of barbaric otherness and sensory disorganization were, to quote, intentionally deployed by indigenous ritual specialists in opposition to colonial domination. And he notes from the archive, loud drumming and chanting outside the colonial settlement of Grahamstown during the 1830s by indigenous specialists who basically wanted to scare the settlers. So I'm saying that they actually activated the thing. It's also not new in a way. It's also coming back. Finally, the sacrifice was also a rejection of paternalism, which they understood as central to the dominant white middle class condemnation of sacrifice. This was specifically articulated in response to animal rights activists and vegans who attended the event on Clifton in an attempt to convince them to quote Solani, to practice our traditions without harming the animals. And there are some videos you can see the discussions taking place online. For Tsolani, this assertion was nonsensical and paternalist. Quote, "What gave them the gall that we can't practice our tradition, and our traditional customs are harming animals? Are they the spokespeople of animals? Because we have been doing this since time immemorial, right? You can't just wake up and you're 21 and you tell us that all black people are wrong in slaughtering because you have just come to some vegan consciousness." Right? That's how you articulate it. Rejecting the association of animal welfare with the end of sacrifice was not a rejection of ethical relations towards animals, but rather an assertion of religious independence and a critique of liberal paternalism. Continuing the discussion. Quote, "Veganism must be taken away from the racist discourse. We must have radical black people who will reintroduce us to veganism in a better radical way, in a manner that respects our customs and ambitions and enriches them. The veganism that we need will take into consideration that black people are people who slaughter. It won't force its logic and collapse everything. If you come with the conclusion that as black people we must stop slaughtering, it must come from us." End quote. So here we find Tsolani and Mary coming together in agreement that the paternalism in veganism that is intolerant of other cultures and which sidelines issues of racism in favor of animal welfare is untenable in the South African context. In the South African context, where African religion deserves recognition and value, there needs to be more nuanced and centered discussions about ethics, animals, and access to public space. Performing sacrifice in this context is a powerful symbolic and material articulation that pushes back against long-held colonial stereotypes, as well as more insidious and everyday forms of contemporary racism and marginalization. Here we must appreciate how the public sacrifice performed a powerful Fanonian moment, where the activist appropriated a denigrated practice as a material and visceral force for the assertion of selfhood and community. Here, the very object of visceral otherness, as viewed from the dominant colonial frame, is appropriated and utilized as a weapon of political claim-making. The issue here is not simply about the question of animal life as if it's an isolated ethical issue, which is often how people approach it, but about the way in which animal sacrifice has been central to the history of racism, colonialism, and taken for granted assumptions of African otherness. The deployment of religion in public space as a political act aimed at forging a new national space was, however, not conducted under the auspices of the state. Deputy Provincial Police Commissioner Hendrik Berger was on the beach on the day of sacrifice. He had earlier been contacted by City Mayor Dan Plato regarding any possible South African Police Service plans to stop the slaughter, because it was widely announced. They announced it on media and they said, "We come to me." The mayor submitted that some of the city's bylaws were being violated, but was unclear. This is what Berger said. He told me they violated, but he didn't give me specifics. So he was unclear on the exact offences. Furthermore, in the parliamentary report, Berger confirmed that private individuals from the area had laid charges for the contravention of the Animal Cruelty Act and the Meat Safety Act. Having attended the event, he submitted to Parliament that no evidence of animal suffering was noted, and that the Meat Safety Act did not apply to slaughter for private consumption and for cultural or religious purposes. Okay, so in my conclusion, I want to link this to some broader questions in the anthropology of religion and nationalism and nation state, and to think about the theory. Religious nationalism in a post-apartheid neoliberal moment. Peter van der Veer's seminal contribution to the analysis of religious nationalism in India challenged the Eurocentric assumptions concerning the inherent secularity of nation-state formation as a supposed break from traditional identities, worldviews, and practices of a pre-modern past. Right? So this is the normative idea, right? That everything gets left behind and you get a modern nation state. He drew attention to the way in which religious discourses and practices are constitutive of the changing social identities in the formation of national identities. Importantly, quote, "These identities are not primordial attachments, but specific products of changing forms of religious organization and communication, new media, new ways of thinking, new ways of talking, that articulates discourse on religious community and discourse on the nation." Right? So they come together in the formation. And he spoke about Hindu nationalism, but also Muslim nationalisms in India and Pakistan. Indeed, attention to this process in India, together with the work of Talal Asad on Protestant normative assumptions within the formation of the secular in Europe, the secular nation state, have been central to critical scholarship on religion, community, and nation-state formation around the world. David Chirister, in his analysis of religion in South Africa, in the context of post-apartheid state formation, draws attention to the contested dynamics of the sacred in the production of what he calls wild religion. Given that apartheid entailed the forceful denigration of people and religion, the post-apartheid state, under the ANC, strove to quote him, turn diversity from an obstacle to nationalism into a national resource, seeking not uniformity, but unity. Right? So uniformity meaning Hindu nationalism, a very strong idea that there's a Hindu nation state. In Europe, there's many Christian assumptions. In South Africa, there's a much more capacious sense in which we can accommodate difference. The avowedly post-racial and post-mono-religious state thus licenses what he calls the wild flourishing of religion in both state and private affairs, in surprising and unexpected ways not captured by the powerful confluence between nation-state formation and religion in Europe or India. Focusing predominantly on African religion, Chirister emphasizes the sacred as inherently contested, and African religion as an open set of resources and strategies for sacralizing. This is his term. African religion as an open set of resources and strategies for sacralizing. Now, Chirister's analysis is insightful for recognizing the way in which religion and national belonging become calibrated in South Africa, given the long history of an oppressive religious and racial nationalism, apartheid, that the post-apartheid state has continuously strived to undo. He thus draws attention to the articulation of religion by a variety of state actors in often inconsistent ways, but also to the work of private groups that deploy and articulate religion, quote, as always entangled in a changing world, end quote. However, the notion of religion as an open set of resources, always embedded within the world, is perhaps better understood as a feature of religion in general, rather than bearing any specificity to African religion or religion in Africa. Furthermore, the use of wild, sequestered from a colonial and contemporary politics of otherness, fails to appreciate the political and philosophical entanglements of religion and of practices like sacrifice. Sacrifice is a perfect site to understand the competing normative assumptions about religion and racial others as they relate to a politics of religion in South Africa. Sacrifice may indeed be a powerful means for the production of sacred politics, right? As a to quote Chirister, a religious ritual of political sovereignty, central to the foundational myths of nationalism, and with Benedict Anderson. However, animal sacrifice, as a trope of racial and barbaric otherness, has deep colonial roots that linger in normative assumptions about the hierarchy of proper spiritual religions versus primitive material religions. Supposedly the primitive religions are animists and people who are believe in the fetish and these kind of things. Dennis Keenan, in a brilliant analysis of the interplay between the anthropology and philosophy of sacrifice, identifies what he calls Christocentric evolutionism in the theory, right? And the construction of worldwide typologies as central to numerous late 19th century and early 20th century theories of sacrifice. Right? So theorists of religion in the 19th and 20th century coming up with theories of the world, creating worldwide typologies, and sacrifice fits into them. Right? According to the evolutionary view of sacrifice, the sacrifice of Jesus as God himself signals the highest form of sacrifice, bringing an end to sacrifices of transaction, right? Material sacrifice, so you do it for something in return, in favor of a kind of a symbolic, commemorative sacrifice of communion. Right? So in Christian theology, the communion, the consumption of the communion becomes a kind of sacrifice, a higher form. Right? So from spiritual, from material up to spiritual, these hierarchies. From this view, religions that continue animal sacrifice are primitive, barbaric forms, ranked according to a category of worldwide typologies. This hierarchy of religion was of course one among many hierarchies of civilization and people that marked 19th century social theory. And therefore it is no coincidence that Africans will feature as the bearers of civilizational lack, racial degradation, and primitive religious mentality. In South Africa, this confluence is all the more marked given the long history of settler colonialism and apartheid racial state policy, with its intimate links to Calvinist Christianity and theories of racial and civilizational difference. After the end of apartheid, the new state's desire to insert animal sacrifice at the center of rituals of national belonging, which Chittister highlights, and there are many incidences before the World Cup, but also at certain ANC meetings, you find animal sacrifice coming in as part of these rituals, right? So he says, so the newfound desire to insert this animal sacrifice at the center of these rituals, which Chittister points to as a kind of a wild, surprising flourishing of religion, I argue, must also be seen as a response to the history of the degradation of African religious practices, now asserted from a position of power, no longer subject to a Eurocentric hierarchy of value. I argue for the case studies of religion and contestation in public space as instances of the creative deployment and articulation of religion as it relates to notions of selfhood, community, and nation. The post-apartheid state, with its commitment to plurality, together with the increasing power of private interests and the emphasis on community and self-organization in the contemporary neoliberal environment, are important for understanding the fraught contestations over race, religion, and public space in South Africa today. Indeed, as neoliberal policies champion neutral ideas of the free market and individual flourishing, the effect is very often the reproduction and re-emergence of race and caste as markers of difference. And a lot of literature on this all over the world. Across the world, housing market booms, gentrification, privatization seem to present the resurgence of old class and race identities, now under the guise of brightening an area or community upliftment. Under these conditions, the practices and presence of religion in public space must be read as a politics of self and community that establishes normative notions of proper religious practice, but which can also challenge the way in which certain normativities are policed. Right? So both ways. I think private actors are engaged in this kind of claim of space in their own capacity as citizens and consumers. The case of the goat in the Woodstock Park, as well as the carefully calibrated animal sacrifice, bring to the fore the deeply divisive politics of race, religion, and public space in South Africa. Given the long legacy of racial segregation, the post-apartheid state is cautious about legislating against religious and cultural groups. This means that claims to regulate religious practice according to universal laws concerning the use of public space or the slaughter of animals are often ruled in favor of religious and cultural rights. As we saw, the Provincial Police Commission was not willing to enforce a universal law about meat safety or animal cruelty when considering the religious rights of the sacrificed community. Religious concentration in South Africa must therefore be considered from the point of view of private actors who bring their own political and religious values into the public in a bid to control urban space. In this contested terrain, the articulation of African religion is both a means of asserting the value of a religious community and as a means of contesting the marginalization and stigmatization of African religion and culture. This paper therefore argues that the articulation of religion in South Africa requires a consideration of the transformation and creative deployment of African religion, which Chittister, I think, so brilliantly points out in his wonderful book, of which I differ on some significant points, but as well as how the specific materiality of the practice challenges the sensory politics of space and race in the country. I argue for further research on the politics of animal sacrifice and religion, as claimed by marginalized communities, in a bid to assert a sense of selfhood, and I've said this many times, basically challenge the Eurocentric hierarchies of value. Thank you.
So, as is customary practice, thank you for the talk, and we invite questions. We take back questions in groups of 3 or 4, and then give the presenter a chance to respond. So, who would like to ask a question? Jess, I see Jess. Go ahead.
Thanks. I was really thought-provoking paper and enjoyed it a lot. I'm curious how your argument fits with sort of broader global shifts towards the performativity of religion. So when you think about the changes you're describing
is that a hand? Amber?
This might what is the relation between animal blood sacrifice and practicing communication with ancestors?
Other questions, Simon?
Yes, thank you, Shaheed. I mean, what I'd like to do is I'd like to just give a very short personal anecdote and then shift. It was very interesting. You located your analysis in Cape Town. I'd like to shift it to Johannesburg for a moment, and then I have the second question at the end. I mean, the anecdote is my mother, who was born in Switzerland and never been in South Africa before, married my father, who was a farmer close to Swaziland in the 1930s. And at the first Christmas, my father gave the farm workers, who were Swati speakers, an ox as a Christmas present. And this ox in front of my mother was slaughtered with the neck cut. The blood was caught in a bowl and was then used later for different purposes. The point of the story is my mother then passed out. She fell to the ground having passed out, coming from Switzerland. I mean, that's the first story. I believe my mother wasn't there, but I mean, I think. Charles Buttergill, who was a doctoral student here and is now in Pretoria, wrote a thesis 10 years ago, which is entitled Discourse on Identity, Conversations with White South Africans. I was his supervisor. I went back to the thesis. I've got a quote, because he did his work in Greater Johannesburg, Pretoria, and among Afrikaans speakers, white Afrikaans speakers in Limpopo. And this is a translated quote, which he uses very much as you have. He uses to illustrate a meme, a kind of idea which carries greater meaning than the little idea and is broadcast. And it's a translation from the Afrikaans, if I may read it. If there next to me now is an other color guy whose culture dictates to him he can slaughter an animal because they have a funeral, they may now slaughter in his backyard. Now, I mean, can you think what drama, what impact that would have on me and my neighbors and also on children, to see how they slaughter an animal, cut off its throat, and let it bleed, let it bleed, let it bleed. And I think this meme among those whites who find themselves in gentrifying Greater Johannesburg is a very interesting one. And it's one that, I mean, I'm not relating it to my mother, but I mean, I do see the link. So I would be wondering whether you thought that your analysis would hold differently. You mentioned the AWB in the north from in Cape Town. And then finally, my last question has simply got to do with Statistics South Africa. Statistics South Africa, in their wisdom, decided in 2001 to ask about South Africans' religions. In 2011, they left it out because they believed it was not important. I mean, there have been a few general household surveys, but I wonder if you could comment on Statistics South Africa deciding, as I understand it, to leave out a question in the national survey regarding religion.
Go ahead.
Okay, so this is Christianity in America, you mean like conservative kind of?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, right.
I think, no, I think I don't see why you should Hindu nationalism in India is basically fascist. If you see what's happening now, they're trying to implement population registries, they're attacking people, they kill people on the street. It's barbaric. Nothing like that's happening in South Africa. Right? That is fascist.
That wasn't
And I'm just saying, the Hindu is similarly with the Christian right, right? They obviously have these ideas. I don't see this as just simply a reactionary right-wing movement. I see this as articulating something, right, which has a deeper historical resonance. And it's specifically important to recognize that it's coming out of people who are informed, right? They're informed of the very critical theory and some anthropological analysis and things which we are also informed by. Of course, we don't have to agree with what people are doing, but in order to analyze it, you have to take it, but to recognize that there, right? Another interesting thing to say, I can't comment much on American Christianity, to be honest, but something interesting in India is that it's a majoritarian movement, right? So it does at some level claim a kind of a anti-colonial or decolonial thing, like the colonialism came and messed us up, and the Muslims messed us up, so we have to go back to our original roots, right? And in that sense, it's very reactionary. It's like premised on, it's reactionary. It's premised on a sense of Hindu like weakness, as if they have been, they have been done down all along, and they have been too weak, and now they must rise up and be strong and claim England as like a Hindu Raj, right? And South Africa, yes, black South Africans are in the majority, right? But a lot of the cultural and social capital is not controlled by them, right? So it's actually a very different kind of situation. The public space, the spaces they are talking about, the way this much of society is mobilized is actually very different. So this is a claim of entry into the public. Secondly, it's very different because they don't claim to want to exclude white people. In the interviews I had with them, they just said, we want universal access. That's why I wrote it. The idea is they must just let us come here. So that was very much part of their discourse. They're not saying we want to take the houses and cliff them. They're just saying we don't have space. And these are other parts I couldn't add. A lot of the movement was actually saying the beaches, right, are places where people celebrate over New Year's, right? And they spoke about the kinds of access to a backyard, right? Access to safe places to chill. And then how this is actually a feature of South African life. Right? So when there are masses of black people coming to these beaches, it is a feature of South African life. And when people try to remove it, that is something which they contest. They are contesting liberalism, right? They are contesting this neutral language, and they are basically trying to bring a more radical restorative politics. So in my reading of it, and I know many people are scared of these kind of things, they think it's reactionary, they think it's stuff, but actually when you look at it closely, when you look at what the people are saying, they are actually saying that there are certain ways, right, in which black bodies are policed in public space. There are certain spaces which are uncomfortable in terms of access. We know this, restaurants and clubs and all these kind of things, and they are actually just drawing attention to this. And interestingly, they followed up the sacrifice by protesting against the homeless. And when the whole thing became about the homeless people being fined, they also went there and they did the sacrifice. So I think it's like a very interesting thing to just follow, right, and understand what are they trying to do. Rather than to make a judgment. So my idea is not to make a judgment, I'm trying to understand what is this context, and what does it tell us about the South African moment. So I think the differences are important, and will it one day lead to virulent African black nationalism, which wants all of us to get out? It might, but I'm not there to predict it, right? I identify myself as part of the communities that have benefited from the inequality. Right? I'm very clear about that. It's not like I'm standing outside, I'm not inside. Amber, what is the relation between blood sacrifice? I don't know. I'm not really an expert on that. I know it's central. Right?
Yeah.
There is this idea in many religions, in many religious practices, that a sacrifice, is a transformative moment which calls the ancestors or the gods into being. Right? And it goes all the way. You can read about the Greeks and how they engaged in sacrifice and things like this. You can't. In a sense, you're asking a why question, like what is the thing? Many people have different arguments, right? So some people argue it's because blood is a symbol of life. So by giving one life, you get your life back. You get something in return, right? But we have to go into much longer discussion about sacrifice. But in one analysis of it, sacrifice belongs to material religions. Religions that think we material in the sense that we do this material thing, we give it to the god or to the deity, and the deity gives us something back in return. And monotheistic or symbolic religions, you don't actually do that. You're supposed to not ask for something from God. You can't do it with expectation. So there is this hierarchy, but there's a lot of literature on that, or these analysis, right? But these are all, in this case, they explain it themselves, right? They say it's about power, it's about giving us power, it's about cleansing the space. We know from the literature on African religion that it is something about protecting the household, calling the ancestors. But of course, the ancestors traditionally are the ancestors of the home, right? They stretch over time. And here, I think that's what I'm trying to say. It's new. It's a creative. It's a new deployment, right? Oh, Simone, wow, thank you for that. I think it's not something specific to South Africa, of of course, right? So when we talk about 19th and 20th century social theory, when we talk about the establishment of middle-class normativities, the Foucauldian histories of Europe, where the abattoir, where undesirable, violent stuff is pushed to the edge of the city, and the city is cleansed as a space. So that's how you behave in a normal way, You control your, it's a sensory question, maybe we'll argue it's a sensory question. You control how you speak, how you operate, this kind of middle-class Protestant thing. So it's definitely much more, right, than just South Africa, definitely. And so it's obviously, I think that your mother's experience kind of confirms that, right? Because she's a product of this European world where these transformations have taken place, right? Where animal sacrifice is long since the start of Christianity. Animal sacrifice is over. It's the end. Jesus sacrifices himself, and everybody is saved. So this is definitely part of Christian theology. But later on, as what the scholars have argued, historians have argued, as this comes into, social theory, as it develops during the Enlightenment, these become part of these hierarchies, right? These hierarchies of saying, okay, so the people that do still sacrifice are backwards and primitive. Of course, it's not only, on the one hand, yes, some people argue it's about the development of worldwide typologies, right? Hierarchies of religion, but also it's about internal beliefs, right? In Europe, between Catholics and Protestants, about the proper, form of sacrificing Christianity. And out of that comes this kind of, but there's definitely an element of denigration, that we have gone above it, we have ascended this thing, and there are people in the world who still do it. And interestingly, I came to this question partly through my work on Islam, because Islam is the sacrificing religion, the sacrificing monotheism. And there's a lot of Orientalist and very Islamophobic rhetoric about how they're also barbaric, for doing this kind of barbaric thing. So I think that's very interesting. I've heard other stories like this in South Africa, of people who, in their relationship with their laborers, with their workers, see the value of, giving them a thing, but then have these moments of shock and horror. And I think that's why I call it sensory politics, right? Because the horror and the exclusion. The doctoral student, I can't really comment, I don't think that the reason why Cape Town comes up in this paper is because it's about Cape Town. I'm not saying Cape Town, I'm not buying into the discourse that Cape Town is unique in its, in its racial apartheid. We know that the whole country is divided and was divided in this way, right? I think Cape Town has become a target, partly because the inner city has been gentrified a lot, and there have been in the last 10 to 15 years changing demographics, right? Residential demographics have changed, and you're finding a lot of very wealthy white South Africans and people from other parts of the world coming in, right? So that is one reason why it's there. The other obvious reason is that the ANC lost, right? So they started this whole discourse to say, this is, South Africa is racist. But of course, Cape Town is racist and the DA ran. But we obviously know that it's much more complicated than that, right? Spatial apartheid, spatial politics, neoliberalization, these things happen in different ways, right? In different parts of the country. But I think that quote from this Afrikaner guy is again reinforces my point, right? That on the one hand, he seems to be saying, okay, I understand I can do that, I understand I should respect cultural rights, but then it becomes a very moral and horrified question of the animal bleeding and bleeding, and all this kind of the horror. What do the children see? Are the children going to become crazy? And this is something which I think we have to trace back again to the transformations in sensibility, right? The transformations in what is a proper thing to view, right? How the abattoirs, how slaughter becomes something you must hide, right? So the very people, right, that are consuming McDonald's and KFC are also horrified by the idea that we must see slaughter. Right? So that is something which is quite unique, right, to a particular kind of class and civilizational and racial position. So when you go to many other parts of the world, people don't necessarily have this idea. Right? So in India, in fact, it is valued. People don't want to buy packaged chicken in a sanitized package. They think this is really weird. They think it's coming from far away, it's cold, you didn't see the animal living. Right? So they actually choose live chicken, they slaughter them, and you see the whole process in front of you. Right? And that kind of horror and stuff doesn't accompany. They desire that. Right? So we have to look at different ways of relating, and then we see that these are particular forms of, these are particular forms of sensibility. They're not universal. And I think it confirms that. And I think it's also got to do, I haven't yet gone into this because life is too short, but But there is something about moral philosophy. There are European moral philosophical positions which argue that violence is ubiquitous. Violence is always in society, but hidden violence is better than violence we can see. And I mean, that's something hopefully I want to explore later. You know, do we have to accept this position and interrogate it? About the religious census, I think here, you know, this is interesting. I don't know anything really about why they decided to change it. But what I can say in response to your question is that when I think about things like race and religion, I'm not talking about identity. I'm talking about a historically informed sensibility, right? That comes from being in a particular position, having a particular way of view. So people are articulating this thing, African religion, right? But there's a lot of contestation around this here, and people wrote against them and said, you are butchering African religion, you guys don't know what you're doing. You know? But when I went to interview them and things, they were like, yes, we do that. That's why we didn't do it. You know? We're not trying to claim this is our primordial religion and we have Africans are here to, you know, restate our claims. They are just saying that we might not be exactly the same like our fathers were and our forefathers, but we are not going to give up on this particular value. Right? We see some value in it, we've grown up with it, and we don't buy into this thing. And it's important to read into this moralizing argument. And what I think maybe to link also to Jess's very important comment, is that's where you see the question. You know, when the discussion of veganism comes up, I found in a lot of discussion with people that it was not an issue. It was not an issue to say, no, veganism is nonsense, it's a white thing. They were like, no, veganism is something we have to address in the contemporary world. Industrial meat production is a factor, right? It is violent. But there was something very interesting they said. They said, this is not murder. This is not industrial meat production. Right? We have brought this animal here and we are doing it singly as an individual. And there were some very interesting commentators who came out. And in fact, even Mary Wallace herself, she was very interesting because she's a vegan. And she has gone through this whole process of reflection. Even though she had not said anything racist in that incident, right? She was just shocked. But the racism that came up and put her in the spotlight, she reflected on it and she said, she told me, what is the point? I forget. Something about the paternalism, you know? It's something about the paternalism and the moral high ground, you know, that comes with these positions. Because when viewed as an isolated incident between, you know, animal and me in this kind of isolated way, yes, it's very easy to take a strong moral position. But when we start to look at the complicated ways in this is configured, this is the point. That is, she told me that animal, that sheep, was treated far better than any sheep that goes through a modern abattoir. Actually, that was also a thing, because she knows about the modern abattoir, she knows about the barbaric and horror, because that's part of becoming a vegan, is about, you know, learning about these things, about reforming yourself. So the question, and that's part of what I'm trying to do, is to destabilize this. Sorry, I took too long.
No. Another round of questions? I see Bashir's hand. I have several questions myself. Saman, so Bashir, Saman, Claire, and then I'll ask a question.
Thank you for it. It's also just linking on I think one reading of Chillister where he writes on the Christian movement of South Africa, and he links it back to the time of the settlers event, and where the Dutch People's Church was the only church or religion that was allowed to be publicly practiced. And I think this paper also makes a link to that again, because now the people can't come out in these public spaces and really practice this religious, the sacrificing act. So my question is, how do you think, or what is your evidence, or what is your evidence show, how do these people, material religious practitioners, how do they gauge or compromise their religiosity or their spirituality in spaces that are concerned or seen as normative?
Thank you very much. My question is about social movements. So sometime last year, just when the anti-GBV movement was starting up here at Stellenbosch, I was chairing a meeting for a group of queer students who also wanted to partake in change. And the majority of the group was liberal and had left-wing politics. And at some point, there was a suggestion from the group to slaughter an animal on the workday as a symbol of activism and change and demanding change. And there was one individual who was white vegan and self-proclaimed animal rights activist who reacted very hysterically and wanted to remove himself from the meeting immediately and expect people to apologize for that suggestion being made. So I was wondering what you make of people who support the issue and support the need for change, but who don't support the needs and comes across very optimistic.
So what do I think about it? Okay.
Your feelings or your take on that?
Okay, fine. Well, first of all, yeah, that was really excellent paper. I really enjoyed pretty much everything about it. So it just brought to mind also two kind of, I think, related incidents where last year when it was Diwali, there was a law, or there was a rule that you couldn't set off fireworks, and I think the reason was also because of the animal rights, and the issue that it would disturb animals. And another incident is in the Marikana Commission of Inquiry, which Judge Parker really seemed to fixate on an incident in a few days before the massacre when the police gunned down 34 people, to an incident where the mine workers accused, they were like murdered, these dastardly criminal mine workers murdered a security guard and performed brutal rituals and cut off the tongue. This is something that the Commission almost fixates on, and every subsequent interview that Parliament does in years subsequent to the massacre, he really likes to fixate on this, the brutal rituals of the miners and how this was such a criminal act. And so I guess in relation to what you're saying, in a democratic South Africa, could you speak to this tension between traditional practices, or I guess in relation to customary law, and then the sort of Roman Dutch law, the constitutional law in both apartheid South Africa? It's quite broad, but just ideas that come to mind.
So my question, I think I have several, but they all have to do with the public and the private. So, I mean, the first is the space, especially the space at the beach. I mean, the space at the park is also an interesting space. But what is it about these particular spaces, sort of spaces of leisure, but historically quite white spaces, or spaces of white middle class leisure? Like, is there something about the beach in particular, or the park in particular, that is becoming a target for kind of debate, activism, or whatever, that's worth commenting on? And maybe it's slightly different to, say, the university becoming a target, or like, is there something about the particular space? And I know that Kevin Durham, he wrote, he did some work on beaches on the south coast of KwaZulu-Natal, and the ways that race talk, kind of social psychology studies of kind of race talk on these beaches, and the idea of when are these spaces black spaces, when are they white spaces, and so on. So I think there's something interesting there about the particularity of leisure and claiming that as a public space and what that means. The second question is around the state, and I mean, I think linking with what Claire said, I mean, it's interesting to remember the Diwali ban on fireworks, and at what moments does the state hesitate, like the guy you cite, where there may be conflicting laws here, I'm not going to intervene, and other times, kind of J.P. Smith in sort of Law and Order Cape Town, sort of saying, buskers can't be here, this is for what public space is for, this is not what public space is for. I guess, how does one think about the ambivalence of the state as capturing something here? Maybe an unwillingness to transform these spaces, or a willingness in principle, but an impossibility of acting on these spaces, and maybe their unwillingness to touch certain kind of private interests. Is there something about the relation between the state and those private interests that need to be teased out? The third level of public and private is about the media and the social media role here. The fact that these events were in a sense spectacularized or announced, that they became debated on social media. Does that do anything? Does it matter that these were events that were mediated in those sorts of ways? That the sacrifice was announced, for instance, before the time on social media. How does it change? Does it change things? And how? And if so, how? So, a small question.
Can I just add a little bit onto one that I forgot about, but it was also spurred by you speaking about the religious aspects as well, because again, also in the Marikana Commission, you had this sort of relation between how the traditional African muti rituals were presented versus how the courtroom was orchestrated, people come and swear on the Bible before they give testimony. So there's this sort of respecting or seeing that one religion is acceptable, but then another one is seen as barbaric. So I just, if you could also just speak to that, so like the law and religious practices.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is the big question, right? What does it mean? What does it mean to have a state a country like a constitutional system, which clearly continues to uphold certain minority ideas? And that's actually what I find very interesting, to study in South Africa. To study how, I don't have an answer to it, right? I don't have an answer to how African religious practices are supposed to be incorporated into a normal, kind of system. When I was doing this research last year, I used to wonder, like, maybe you can donate your body or maybe you can donate body parts to Muti. I don't know. Why do we consider that so barbaric when we donate them to science? So these are these ideas. Now, of course, it becomes very complicated because what is the history of human use in African practices? And this is very complicated, and it's not something we have a clear answer for, right? So it's not a question of saying, yes, we know what African religion is, and this is really what it is, right? Because things are always changing and dynamic. But I think for me, the question is to open that question, right? So I think your examples are really interesting. The Muti practices, which 90% of them, in fact, I changed my position on that, on this body bag thing, because I realized that actually most of African traditional Muti practices are not got to do with human bodies. They've got to do with other things, They've got to do with animal parts and herbs and all other kinds of stuff. So these things get sensationalized, right? So we need to, but I think your example is great. I mean, the court says you can't do that outside, but no, you have to swear on the Bible in here. Right? So these are normativities which haven't been worked out, actually. They haven't been worked out in South Africa. And that's why I'm trying to read this as evidence of the stirrings, of what's happening and what it tells us about just the moment. Right? People are starting to see this. And maybe the previous generation didn't bother about it. They were not as educated. They were not as privileged. So some people commentators like to write, this is a privileged movement. Well, no. It's okay to be privileged. Other people are privileged. Now people have privilege, they have a voice, and now they're articulating something, and we can analyze it. Right? So I think your thing is really interesting, and especially the way you say the commission fixates on these acts, this barbaricness, as if the Muti is linked to the murder. What is the relation? Do they investigate it, or is this always the kind of, the fear? And what I try to do is actually we have to link that, to these longer histories of savagery, of thinking in terms of savagery. I think it's very important though, because I think it's very important that we don't just say, yes, this is African religion and we need to have African religion in the thing, because it's not very clear what African religion is. There's different kinds of practices, there's different spokespeople, and South Africa does have an idea that you can, access this plurality. So, but the conversation needs to start. Bashir, sorry. Sorry, I typed in a past in one question, I lost it. Bashir, this is very interesting. I mean, the research has to be done, right? You are asking actually a question of how people who practice these practices, which are in certain kinds of spaces, whether you're getting employment or whether you work with someone, are considered barbaric, right? And how do you relate to them? Right? And that's an empirical question, right? I can tell you from doing these interviews that people are not happy about it. They're not happy about why they have to be, ostracized for something which they have grown up with and which they do not link to, say, industrial meat production. I have another student, Nomzamo Ntombela. If he watches this, there's your plug. She has a brilliant data on, doing the sacrifice, coming of age, graduating, and then having to wear, I forget the name now. Okay. The bangle. And she describes how, people who, some of the young girls, that, when they go back into their private schools and their middle class, spaces, are ostracized. People are like, oh, that thing stinks, that thing's weird, but they have to do it, it's part of it. And so these are the things I think one can analyze, and I think she's done a really good job at getting into that, but we need to do much more on that, Because I think sometimes we forget about it. And actually what I'm trying to also say is that somebody who has experienced this marginalization has a particular kind of insight into the world, right? And what I found during this research was that it was very similar to some of the very critical scholarship in theory and in the history of, the production of disciplines like anthropology and religious studies. So we need to take that perspective seriously and understand it. So I think it's an empirical question, which is very important, and maybe it links to Bernard's public and private. When do people feel that they need to hide parts of themselves? When do they feel that no, we cannot talk about this when we work in our workplace or in our thing? And that's a question, and that's a question we need to research. And I think importantly, the reason we need to research is because we have to recognize the very peculiarity of the South African situation. Sometimes I think it's perverse. Perverse is a strong moral judgment. Let's just say it's peculiar. Why it's peculiar is because the majority of the country doesn't have access to the symbolic means of, institutionalizing, right? So as Stephen Friedman and things have shown, you can be the new black middle class, and now you can go to Cubana or even better places, depending on how much money you got, but you can't necessarily also still do whatever you want. There are certain codes and rules over there, and those codes and other normative are what I've lost as Protestant European normativities. And they have been very strong in South Africa, and they continue. Right? And that's why these frictions tend to happen. Bernard, wow. I think the beach is, so through the research, this is what they mentioned. And I know you also alerted me to some wonderful, there's a lot of literature, right, on beaches in South Africa, during apartheid. In this case, especially with the grape and things, I think the beach, a space of leisure, of course, you're supposed to be free. Right? So now, if you are free in your little racial enclave, then the threat of this other coming in can produce hysteria. But there's also a sexualized question, right? The beach is where you don't have your clothes on, right? Where you're vulnerable. You walk around your underwear on the beach. So there's something about the beach also which heightens racial anxieties, right? And so maybe that's something, I think there are people doing this research, people have looked at it, but again, it can be really interrogated more. We know we have these spaces in South Africa which are seasonal beach resorts, right? Along the Garden Route and places like this. I myself was just in Mossel Bay last year, and we got racially attacked, right, by some guy who started going crazy because we were there in his space. Now, of course, we are fairly confident Indian middle class, so we just stood there and started giving him back. But fortunately, my cousin's wife was there, and she said, "No, this is dangerous. Just get the hell out of here. You don't fight with these people. You came for holiday, right? We didn't come here to intrude your space or anything." So the question is, these are highly heightened spaces, right? And they do have something to do with, I think Bernard's saying, the private space, the holiday house, getting away, being free, and how you want that space to be regulated. And that's why I'm trying to suggest, Bernard might not agree, that we need to recognize this, right? These are private interests, property owners, right? In the name of consumption, no longer in the name of the nation that are doing this. And that is an analysis that I try to inform, but again, something that has to be done. The Diwali thing is very interesting, right? Because I'm not trying to say that animal rights don't matter. It's not animal rights don't matter, cultural rights must. That's a very binary argument. That's kind of universal rights versus cultural specificity, cultural relativism. That's a kind of cultural relativism. I'm not really interested in that. And I think also the people, the interviewees, you can really see they're not interested in cultural relativism either. They're not saying, this is our culture, we've always had it, right, in a pristine state, and therefore we don't care about your new ideas. They're actually saying, we care about your new ideas. We want to have a dialogue. But we don't want you to come here with your hysteria and all your things, and just basically ostracize us. Right? So it's about a different kind of a dialogue which has to take place. And maybe, and we have to do this without going to these ideas of essentialism and primordialism, right? So in the case of Diwali, there is a movement in India, for example, because of air pollution, actually saying that fireworks are a fairly recent invention, right? And they've taken over as part of the commercialization of Diwali. It is completely, it's messing up the environment. There are these questions with animals, and so some people are saying, well, actually, before fireworks came around, we used to light candles. We used to put things on the home and stuff, right? So there are these people who are saying, no, this is another way of thinking about it, right? But that's an internal reflection. It's not like somebody coming and saying, you are barbaric because you celebrate Diwali like this. And I think that's important, to have the conversation, to open it up. There's a possibility for it. And I think that's what these guys were very interested in. They told me, there's also the possibility that we stop sacrifice. But not as an imperative. Not as a moral imperative, you have to do it because we said we got the moral high ground. That's a question of morality and moral imperatives. I'm also trying to argue with some of my work that moral imperatives are the problem, right? Moral certainty is the problem. And we live in a complex world of interrelated questions, right? Lots of entanglements. And so moral certainty might make you feel very good, but most likely, moral certainty also doesn't allow you to view all the complex ways in which this thing comes up, right? And I think animal sacrifice is a really good way because you have this clear moral stance of animal pain, of suffering, of barbarism, but for the person you're encountering with, there's another long history which you are actually excluding if you only isolate on the issue, right? So isolated moral questioning is part of the problem. I'm being very, like all academics, right? I'm being very iffy about it. It's a conversation, it's not a position. But I think your point about, the ambivalence of the state is very important, right? And I think maybe we don't give them, at least from when I'm looking at some of these cases, we like to bash the state, as if the South African state did nothing. They've done a lot of stuff, right? And one of the things they have done is try to regulate inclusivity, right? So if you go into, as a Muslim person, into Europe or America, you are ostracized. You are odd, right? And they can't understand it. They can't understand when they come here, many people, that, women with headscarves walk around, nobody cares about them. So there's a certain way in which the post-apartheid has done this, and we need to analyze it and try to, figure it out. The social media question. So this is the issue. There is a tendency to say, this is all about social media and it's just uproar. People get overworked up, sensationalized, and it's social media. I think social media is another form of media, right? It does change the way information is disseminated. It can make it more punchy, it can make it more funny, it can make it more controversial, right? And it can obviously move around at a very much higher speed. But I don't necessarily subscribe to the idea that it's completely radically new, right? Because language is a form of mediation. So when I speak and I say you're barbaric, I'm also basically mediating your practice into my mind about you as something else, right? And if I share a picture of you doing something weird, right, and send that around, I'm doing the same thing. So there's something we need to recognize about mediation, and how social media becomes a means, right, of facilitating this. Of course, for Mary Wallace in the original thing, she was very clear that this is an issue of social media, because she put her shock and horror on the social media, and it suddenly went into bestiality and all that stuff, right? And I spoke to her quite a few times, and she's like, it's very interesting. She doesn't subscribe to these ideas, and very soon, by the next day, she was like, oh my God, this is what's happening, right? But the question then is not that social media did it. The question is what kinds of horror, right? What kinds of sensory responses? What do they make possible? And in this case, a sensory response of horror towards a crowd of black people where a goat tried to, it's not a unique event, right? You can go into the historical record and find these things. So we have to study these tropes all the time. And I use it more as an example to say, you see, it tells us, what does it tell us? It tells us that the South African public space is a highly divisive and racialized space. People are highly aware of this racialization of space, but that doesn't mean they're all wrong. It just means that's what's happening right now, right? And sorry.
Amber, we have time for one last round of questions. Amber?
Can you call those spaces divided when they're not actually divided, they're occupied as white spaces?
Yankee?
Thanks, Jay. I'm trying to think of how to ask this question because it seems like a big assumption I want to speak about, which is the question of Christianity, the majority religion, and yet we have this if I were to perform a ritual and slaughter a sheep, that would be seen as an insult
Yeah.
to my ancestors because you don't use a sheep for
Oh, yes, of course. Yes.
you use either a goat or a calf. But in this particular case, a sheep was chosen. And I'm interested in knowing whose tradition was that and how this animal was chosen and the kind of discourse that took place in terms of deciding to slaughter this particular sheep. And what does it say about, on the one hand, this hope that South Africans can be united, especially in cases or in moments like this. And on the other hand, we divide. I don't recognize that tradition. It's not my tradition. It's not a sheep.
Yeah.
And I don't know who's imposing this tradition on me.
Right.
And who does it? I'm still, as I said, I'm trying to think about the nuances in terms of understanding tradition because I think here we have to appreciate the diversity of traditions that we have amongst Africans themselves. So I'm sorry to ask you this.
Important question, yeah.
Thank you for
Yeah.
the presentation.
And is it Anita?
Yeah.
And do you have a question?
Yes.
Uh,
So I just wanted to refer to the fact that we talk about this is quite an extreme example, of exclusivity of excluding marginalized people. Whereas I feel very often academics are complicit in excluding students every day or marginalizing people every day. I mean, we can think of many examples, but I mean, the one thing that really tried to establish, for example, at the Center for Student Counseling is for them to appoint a traditional leader, for example, that we can send students who really come from traditional backgrounds, that they have that knowledgeable person who can advise them. That's just one institutional example. But when it comes to other kinds of exclusion, obviously, many lecturers will say to a student, you are in academia now, we must leave your religion at the door. And in some societies it's very popular. And I just feel that sometimes to me the academics are very are moving there in a hierarchy of their own, almost like an ideal world that I would say when we say we, that we create for ourselves. So it's this luxury of talking about theory, that those theories don't, I mean, how many of us will ever be exposed to a public slaughtering? It's still not part of this discussion. So it's a very extreme example, but every day, all of us are in relative positions of power, and yet we don't stand up and fight to include marginalized students. So I just want to bring it, maybe make it a bit more concrete, even though I really respect what you do, but I just feel that sometimes as academics we don't see the student sitting in front of you now has to commute from Croatia, not eaten today, does not get a place in bed. These spaces are still, I don't want to say least, but reserved for certain people. And so some people just stay marginalized, and we are in positions of relative power that we prefer to look the other way because we just talk about academia. We don't talk about the practical lives of our students and experiences. Thank you.
Rose.
I've also just been thinking about this, and it's in addition to Nike's point, and just knowing about slaughtering, and that I've never known at a point where sheep was slaughtered to common ancestors at any point. Sheep is slaughtered for celebrations or graduation, stuff like that. There's no point that I know in the history, especially as a total president, the people that were there who I know are also closer. So my comment is more on just in terms of social media, the discussion around
the slaughtering of that sheep around 2018. The discussion, especially on Twitter, was that it was the act itself was an assertion of black male masculinity, and as a response to being challenged by whiteness and white spaces, more than it was a fight for racism for all of us. So that in itself was white black men essentially asserting themselves in a space where they were challenged. So it has nothing to do with wanting the end of racism, because if that were the case, then black people would be included. It wouldn't be just black men are asserting themselves in this manner and asserting the black male masculinity. And especially coming from a culture that is patriarchal, which is about Xhosa culture. So it was just, I don't know how to realign this messaging of, the act itself being one where we're fighting the system for a sheep.
That's fine. Okay, I got 5 minutes? 2 minutes.
Well, 2 minutes.
Sorry guys. Yeah, so there's long questions. Yeah, Yanji, I mean that's the whole point. They said themselves, we did not do the goat. We do not want to, it's not traditional. There's nothing, but you see, if you think about the anthropology of religion, religions are always mutated, right? There's always a new articulation and deployment. And so this is a political deployment. And it definitely offended a lot of black South Africans who said, these people are, just taking our practice and doing the stuff. And that's fine, because in most societies, if you take Islam, there are people who do certain things and other people who get offended, right? But when we study the thing, we study the different competing positions, right? And they were very conscious about it. They said, this is not about a goat, this is not about doing traditional things, right? This is a political act, right? And the political act means we are doing the sheep. Now, whether this went to offend a whole lot of people who said, this is completely butchering is fine, and that's another question to interrogate. That's about how African traditional religion is being claimed and contested within South Africa today, right? I was trying to look at the act and how it fits into the event with the policing, etc., etc. So I think your point is entirely valid, and it requires actually further research, right? Because there are differences, there's no such thing. And that's when people say, oh, that's exactly why I think it's important to recognize that they recognize that too. It wasn't like a nativist claim to say, this is African religion and we want it, no, it was actually a much more nuanced and sophisticated thing. And I think that's really important, so thank you for that. And maybe this is actually what we need to do. We need to recognize the diversity of African religious practices and what they mean and how they're articulated and the power dynamics, as Nosy says, right? That is all the things we need to study. But I'm not studying all of it, right? I'm just studying particular events and how they have taken place in the last 3 years. Nosy, just to add to your question, absolutely. There definitely are people who see this as just another assertion of black masculinity. But that is itself a critical analysis, right? That's a critical analysis of patriarchy, which is a particular very loaded concept, as it relates to what we call African and how this, the complexities. So, that's also another kind of thing to do, right? To say, okay, you can study the competing ways in which this particular event is perceived and thought about. I'm not trying to suggest that all black people in South Africa support this, right? But neither am I just gonna go along with a particular kind of, Twitter feminist position which says this is not us, this is all black masculinity, right? That would just be to take a side. What I try to do in the paper is not to take a side. I'm trying to analyze this practice for what it tells us about the histories of both how we think about sacrifice in this position and how it encounters in the public space, right? It's not to say that this is the way. Of course, slaughter, doing public sacrifices, strong men who many people have problems with. These are all other aspects that can be analyzed. So, in a sense, you don't have to realign them. You don't have to realign the two. I can talk about the value of a particular Muslim practice, while also knowing that that practice might have complicated gender relations, which I don't necessarily agree with. Right? Why do I have to have moral certainty about everything? That's actually what I'm arguing against. Right? To have moral certainty is actually to close the questions. And this is very interesting that this group has taken this up, right? And is doing something. Right? The sensory politics is doing to people. Right? So when people get horrified, when they get worked up, that is the data, that is the stuff we're trying to understand, right? And it's not something that comes today, it's a longer history. To Anita, in a way, I absolutely agree with you, right? I absolutely agree with you. But sometimes, as you said, we expect people to come into the university and leave their religion and culture behind. That is the aloof position. I don't subscribe to it. I think that is a completely some kind of secular rationalist position, which thinks that we know everything the truth about the world, and God is dead, and all the stuff, and so you have to be rational. And then it creates alienations, and it creates all kinds of things. That is what many people argue, the colonial university. Right? So we need to change that, right? Definitely. And we need to change that by recognizing the complexity of these practices, which don't fit into the secular rational mode of thinking. But the second part of your thing was whether we actually do something for everybody. At the end of the day, no. My job is to do my work and to help students that I can, right, to develop their critical thinking. I can't be constantly, I can't be a social activist all the time. It's different. I think there's different spheres in life. So we need to recognize, of course, I think the discussions are brilliant. Do we have meetings at 6 p.m., with kids for people who need to travel all the way to Kailicha? That would be a structural problem. That means we are not considering it. But do we all have to, now become champions of every marginalized community? I don't think so. I think we need to study all these questions and see how we can analyze them and relate them. And relate them to how we teach, how we operate in the university, and how we see the ideals, the norms. Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to thank Shaheed for a brilliant seminar and a brilliant discussion. Thank you all for the questions. And next week we have Abraham Leswan, who I think is speaking about language, and I invite you all to come. So let's thank Shaheed. Thank you.